Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you had a good networking break. Our next session is Staying Ahead in the Race for New Talent, moderated by Keng, board member of Singapore Maritime Foundation and director of MPartners. Keng is a member of Singapore Maritime Foundation board, in addition to being on the advisory panel of Claritex Pte Limited. He is actively involved in contributing to various startups, in some instances as a mentor, and in others, just value adding in discussions. He has always been a champion for the need to attract and retain talent and to groom the next generation of leaders. Keng started MPartners Pte Limited to provide financial and corporate advisory, broking, consulting, investment and asset management services. He has a wealth of experience in providing financial and advisory services to the transport industry, having worked for almost 30 years in banking, the latest being the head of Shipping Asia in Hamburg Commercial Bank. Prior to that, Keng was the head of Transport and Logistics Institutional Banking Group in DBS Bank, where he covered shipping, aviation, ports, and logistics business. And before that, he spent many years as a senior relationship manager in DNB, covering clients in the Asia Pacific region. Keng, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. First of all, I would say welcome. I've seen so many faces, familiar faces smiling away. Welcome again, warm welcome to everybody. It's I would say it's challenging as well as it's fun to almost to be at the tail end of the whole session itself. Again, before we start, maybe a word from the sponsor. I'm just kidding. I think that the organizers have told me to say there is going to be a poll that's been uploaded into the Pigeonhole, which you're all very familiar with. Take your time as we go through the panel discussion. Look through the poll, think about it. Please give us your opinion, and then we can take it off at the end of the session itself. Without going further ado, let me just do a very quick introduction. I'm really honored to be amongst the 5 distinguished panelists. Let me do a very quick introduction. Ms. Linda Murray, she is the Global Director, Human Resources and Facilities over at AET. Linda, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me here.
Thank you. Next, we have Mark Charman. Mark is the CEO and founder of Faststream Recruitment, and he founded the company in 1999. Next, we have Mr. Adonis Garefalakis. He is the Director of People and Culture over at the Signal Group. One more person to introduce, Mr. Lakhbir Singh. He's a co-founder of the Orient Maritime Group and CEO of Orient Maritime Agency Singapore Private Limited. Oh, of course, I'll never forget this. Ijun, thanks for joining us today. I will probably put it that he's the co-founder and president of Advisory Singapore. So we were saying you're the closest to the youth. So we get to hear more from you later, such that we can all learn from you and also learn from the next, our bench that comes to take over our positions. Maybe at this stage, perhaps let me just do a quick, give a broad overview of what we're going to discuss today. Phoenix, can I trouble you to have that one slide? Great. So let me just briefly run through some of the points that we intend to do today. Right. What we have been very fortunate is that I'm actually sharing the very first thing that's the one from pertinent findings from a January 2019 survey done by Faststream Recruitment of over 2,000 senior maritime executives. I will not go into the detailed results, but importantly, some of the pertinent points which I would like to pick up that will save us the backdrop for today's discussion. This is a period of unprecedented change. Double Ds, you've heard enough through the seminar, through all the previous things you've done, is digitalization and decarbonization. New demands and aspirations of both the new joiners and, more importantly, also of people who are already in the industry. Next, impact on leadership style, culture, and mindset. By old school is really a misused word, but versus the more savvy packaging. So again, we hear from the panelists later, is there such a big difference? Are we so far off? Are we doing enough? Next, traditional versus new sources of talents. Are we looking only within our industry? if we link it back to the double Ds, should we be looking outside the industry? And how do we attract these new talents? Next, employers versus employees. An interesting point I found in the survey, right? How aligned are we? Not so much of the old school versus new school, but again, hygiene factors, the higher callings. Are we doing enough? Are we addressing some of these concerns? Are we retaining people? Are we attracting the right people? Last but not least, it's an interesting point. Singapore is a Silicon Valley for maritime. Again, panelists can share their opinions later on this point. But again, interesting. This survey was done in January 19. Guess what? The last 2 years, if we fast forward that, what have we been living with? COVID-19. So the impact, is it a positive or is it negative for shipping or for maritime in general? Right, so for today's panel, let me just frame it broadly into 3 main categories. We're talking about the global and recent trends. We're talking about the competitive landscape. And last but not least, which is most important to all of us, so close to our heart, what can we do? Are we doing enough? What can we do better to attract the new talent, to bring people on board, to join our maritime industry? So on this note, let me just kickstart today's panel discussion. First of all, global and recent trends. Yes, we heard enough: digitalization and AI, green initiatives, millennials and Gen Z, COVID-19, work from home. Last but not least, an interesting point that was brought up to me by some of my fellow gurus who says that COVID-19 and transport has maritime done better after COVID, during COVID, than other industries. And if that's the case, how has it benefited or affected us in the recruitment of new talents? Maybe on this note, perhaps I would say, Linda, can I kickstart with you then? Maybe just a quick take on talk about recent trends and global trends, and more importantly, the point about COVID-19 and this aftermath.
Well, thank you, Kenman. And can I just say again, very, very delighted to be here on this panel. So thank you for having me here. And yeah, the topic about the global trends and how that is impacting, or is it an advantage for talent? I guess my view on this is that COVID has accelerated change. It has been unprecedented. And as a segment, and if we're focusing on talent, it is becoming much more challenging. The talent out there's experiences are changing, their requirements are changing. So as a sector, we are to compete in that. I guess there's 2 things for me. One is around how do we really position ourselves as a sector to that talent in the current global trends. As a sector, I think we have a fabulous value proposition, particularly in terms of what we're doing with regards to, the COVID shining a light on maritime as an essential service, the work that we're doing as a sector on technology and digitalization, the decarbonization agenda, which is actually really interesting to the newer and fresher young talent. And the fact that as a segment, we're very resilient. So we have a great proposition, but I think the issue we've got here is that we really perhaps need to up our game in how we market ourselves as a sector to that young talent and the new talent, because it's not just talent coming into the market, our Gen Z, it is talent that we are probably going to need to attract from outside of the sector. Experienced talent, inclusive global talent from all over the world, and the way of working is changing. So that too has an impact. So a subject that's quite passionate to me, but I'm going to pause here so I can just allow some of the other panelists to say a few words too before I continue to share more thoughts on that.
Linda, thanks for this. Really interesting that you mentioned a few keywords: positioning, up our game. Maybe with that, Mark, can I really hear from you then, in terms of how you're seeing from the employer's point of view, and also maybe more important, also from the potential talent's point of view? Mark?
Absolutely. Thank you, Keng. I think that there's a couple of big points here to touch upon. I think the first is that as we start to come out of COVID, companies are very active in their recruitment activity. And we see this globally. So we see this massive uptick in demand for talent, whether that's kind of graduates coming in right at the bottom, or whether that's senior executives. We see a big uptick in demand for talent globally, not just in Singapore. I think, to touch upon Linda's point, COVID has accelerated kind of the whole process here, because I think COVID's given everyone a lot of time to think. And I think that this is true again at all levels of talent. People have had time to reflect. People have had time to think about what their priorities that matter to them most of all. And I think increasingly what we hear from candidates is that they want blended lives. They want fulfilling work. They want work and they want employment that is purpose-driven. And they want employment and they want work and they want careers that's ESG orientated. And I think that when you start to look at this as a subject, it's a really complex subject. It's multifaceted. And it's not something that organizations, that employers are finding very easy to tackle. I think many companies are finding this quite challenging.
Mark, thanks for this. Again, I think it's interesting that you brought up a few points, right? More time to think. And it's interesting to talk about both internal and external factors. While the candidates are bringing them with new aspirations and demands, the employers are either responding or reacting. Maybe on this note, Adonis, you want to share a little bit more, both maybe from your point of view and maybe where you stand as of today?
Certainly, Kengman, and thank you again for inviting me, for putting together this wonderful panel and event, Informal Markets. What is interesting to me, and what has been something that we're really focusing and putting at the forefront of our people efforts, is that all these topics are so intertwined. This transformation that has been taking place the last 18 months due to COVID, the new generations, the millennials and Gen Z, that somehow are so much better prepared, let's say, for this change, with how the remote work has maybe disrupted the status quo, and that flexibility has been something that they've been looking into even before COVID. And we are all now called to adapt to this rapidly changing conditions. That's something that we've been putting a lot of thought into. And at the same time, the agenda of decarbonization and digitalization seem to have popped out from the millennials agenda as well. These are two topics. According to there was this recent survey by Deloitte, the 2021 Millennial and Gen Z survey, that highlighted all the key areas, those key topics for this new generation that's dominating essentially the workforce today. And the findings were about how much more conscious and sensitive they are to the environmental change, how much they strive for flexibility and work-life balance. So all these have somehow come to this moment in time where, when COVID essentially started affecting the way we work and we think, it really puts a new puzzle, that we can see the pieces of the puzzle individually and independently, but it's up to us to put them together and adjust and change, let's say, the way we think and act. So I'm very curious to see and learn from the other panelists as well, how they've been addressing these challenges.
Adonis, thanks for this. Then maybe I'll switch over to Lakhbir, just as an employer, and also coming across earlier when you're an employee. So what's your take on this issue, Lakhbir?
Yeah, thanks, Kengman. And first and foremost, thank you for the opportunity to speak. We have a very distinguished panelists today, so I'm sure I'll be able to learn a point or two as well from the panelists. But maybe before I start about what are the differences that I have observed, I think I want to start by first saying the use of the word talent. Now, again, it depends on who you ask. If you ask me, I see this to be a term that is often misused or often generalized. I think it's high time as an industry we start looking at new entrants and giving them a different name altogether. Because when we use the word talent, it tends to create a misplaced perception of things like us versus them, or smart versus average, young versus old. And all this plays a part then in the whole process of attracting people, at the same time retaining people, and how they interact internally with those that have already been in the industry. So this will be interesting to hear. Maybe I'm sure Linda will have some good views on this. But talking about from an employer-employee perspective, I spent 25 years in an MNC as an employee. And for the last 5 years, I've been an employer. It's interesting because when I was part of an MNC, to attract new entrants was relatively easy. The selling proposition was the brand name, right? It was a big MNC. Every time you have a vacancy, you have hundreds of applicants. So it was a fairly straightforward process. Fast forward, now I'm a business owner myself in a very dynamic industry, yet the process is very different. The era of new entrants today, the expectations, the demands, the needs are very different. I mean, this is a very interesting era of new entrants, right? I mean, this is I call them, you know, the badge of entrants that, or generation that want instant gratification, right? If you think of it, right? I mean, everything is immediate. I mean, and this is thanks to technology, but this is also the perils of technology, right? Everything needs to happen immediately. So yeah, so it's a very different world today from when I started off as an employee some 30 years ago.
Lakhbir, I tell you what, I have to interrupt you there because I can see Ejin can't wait to join the conversation from a millennial and Gen Z point of view. Maybe Ejin, just to hear from you before I go back to the rest of the panelists. Again, it's something that's on top of each of our mind. Are the Gen Z and millennials so different from where we came from, or is it because it's exaggerated because of all the latest things about the green initiatives, the latest trend, talked about diversity, you know, CSR, work-life balance? You know, which is which? Ejin, maybe can we hear from you?
Sure, thanks, Kengman. And as the Gen Z speaker here, I suppose I'm here to convince everyone that we're not so much alien as we are to the rest of the species. I want to just cover 3 brief points, which I think Mark and Adonis have alluded to some of that as well. But I think it's helpful to just get the context of where sort of Gen Z is coming from in the thinking and how they're different from millennials, which have been talked about very much in other conferences and fora as well. I think the first one really is about alignment of mission. When we think about the socially conscious or woke young people of today, I mean, there's this idea that everyone is very much more concerned about ethics over just the quality of products that the firm is pushing out. And that, to an extent, is true. But I think in a lot of research that we've seen around as well, including by Deloitte in their Gen Z study, financial safety and stability is still foremost on young people's minds, and that has not changed. But what young people are looking for is an alignment of their own work with the services that they're commonly using, with their values that they hold dear. So there's this idea of the alignment of purpose that is stronger than it has been before, but not entirely different, I think, from what other people have sought in past generations. The second is really about the shift from work-life balance to what we call work-life integration. I think technology and digitalization, as Lakhbir said, has changed a lot. And nowadays, you know, with a company phone, you may be expected to take phone calls after work hours. On weekends, you clear emails. Before you get to work on the train, you're going through papers. And so this idea that there's work-life balance, a life in the office and a life outside of the office, no longer exists. And we need to start thinking about how work-life integration, this new idea of work being in every little part of your life, is changing. And many young people now are looking for what we call outcome-oriented work versus output-oriented work. The last point I'll just say is about mobility. I think in the past, we think about the career ladder. You climb up the career ladder, or you laterally change to a different company, and that's lateral mobility. But increasingly, we think a lot more about the idea of a lattice mobility. This idea that you can move diagonally across functions, across roles, even within a company, and your current role may not be defining of what you do. let's say I work in the technical aspect of a firm, but I'm volunteering on the sustainability committee of my company, or I'm doing other work in other functions in the company as well, this idea of fulfillment and sort of the work that I am passionate about. And so I think these are the three big trends that we see in amongst Gen Z today, not as different as it was from previous generations, and including LinkedIn Insights studies into this, the difference of demographics. Boomers, as they say, 51% cited work-life balance as the most important thing when looking for a job. That went up to 60% amongst millennials, but it's now back down to 56% for Gen Z. So we're not that different, even if it might seem that way. And I think the same tendencies are just manifesting themselves slightly differently. Yeah. Thanks, Keng.
Good. I can see everybody raising their hands to talk. Maybe if you don't mind, I'll pause here for one moment. I thought we'll go into our next category of competitive landscape. What's the last point is important. I think all those things that the agent has brought up and all the panelists have brought up, I think we'll come back to translate into, say, action plans. How can we do better? What are we doing to address some of these concerns from the latest joiner to the Gen Z to the millennials? So if you don't mind, I'll quickly run to the second part. I would just take on from Lakhbir's point about the big company and small company recruitment. I think that's an interesting part. Competitive landscape, maybe if I may use the, Mark, can I address this to you first? We're talking of intra competition for talent. It means that it's from one company to another company, and inter-competition because now with the tech drive, the green initiatives, we are recruiting people from outside the industry. Maybe a little bit more if you could share on this competitive landscape that we are facing, Maritime versus others and Maritime versus ourselves.
Absolutely. We obviously talked about what talent is, and talent really is about all organisations wanting to hire ultimately the best possible people. And so if we talk in the context of hiring the best possible people, the competition for those people in the maritime sector and between sectors and wider industries. You know, I have a business that is operating in aviation, I have a business that operates in the design sector, and so we see these trends in other sectors. The talent is not just, or the talent kind of war and competition for these people is pretty broad across sectors. I think that you touched upon a point around small and medium-sized companies and how do they compete for this talent with the larger organisations. Well, if we think about this kind of change in the workforce that we're seeing right now, so currently the workforce is something like 50% made up of millennials and Generation Z currently. By 2029, that percentage increases to 72% of the workforce being made up of millennials and Gen Z. We've pretty much all said today that we know that the whole environmental, social and governance piece is moving up the agenda for importance for these people entering the workforce. And so when you look at the maritime sector probably has never had such a good time to compete for these talent. If you think about decarbonisation, you think about the new clean fuels, hydrogen, some of the new concepts that are coming into the maritime sector now, the sector is able to compete for that talent around some of the green initiatives that are happening in maritime. And I think the point there around small and medium-sized companies is those small and medium-sized companies, many of those are leading the charge around green technology. We recently did a big piece of work for a company, a very small company who want to grow very quickly, who are involved in green technology. They were hugely oversubscribed with great people who wanted to work for them because they had a mission. And I think, as Yi Jun said, they had a kind of an outcome that they were working towards. And so they had a lot of people who wanted to work for them. Quite an exciting prospect. Keng Mun, we can't hear you.
Sorry, my apologies. Now I got it. Maybe before I go to Lakhbir, Linda, maybe can I just get some inputs from you as a large employer? Probably are you spoiled for choice, or you find it even more difficult to find the right person?
No, I think someone said earlier the brand is a great attraction, and AT does have a strong brand in all the locations that we employ people. And the challenge is once you get them in, you continue to develop, to retain. You ensure that as an organization, there is a mutual benefit in that. You know, what we expect as employers, which is strong work ethics in terms of people who are prepared to bring them whole selves to work, perform, be mobile, be collaborative, all of those good things is what we expect. But as an employer, what we've been talking about is what do we give in return? And the return is that we provide development, we provide exciting work in an industry that's pretty dynamic and vibrant. It is very global, and that is a big piece for us that attracts that, we are able to mobilize our people to develop them in different locations and grow global mindset. And this is something that I think is really critical for the sector. And with that global mindset comes an ability to deal with some of the challenges that we're talking about here, which is how do you attract talent from different sectors? How do you retain that talent, continue to develop that talent? And so for me, these are the critical things that as a sector, I think we can do more of across the board. And I think it's a significant culture shift for us, a mindset shift that puts us on the stage to compete with global talent from all sectors.
Thanks, Linda. Maybe Lakhbir, over to you. Maybe any inputs from your side? Admittedly, we're saying that Mark has a view to talk about, is in actual fact, you have the right projects, right initiatives, the recruitment can still be on a roll.
I agree with you, but the problem is real today. Attracting new entrants into the maritime sector continues to be a challenge, right? We are competing against sectors that have traditionally been seen as more sexy, for a better word. And maritime sector has always been seen to be a bit more traditionalist. Even the terminologies that we use, right? When we talk about the sector, I hear sometimes we use the word maritime, sometimes we use the word shipping, sometimes we see someone using the word marine. And recently I heard someone say marine time, and it's a struggle, sometimes even trying to explain to a new entrant, what exactly is this industry all about? I think first and foremost, if you ask me, you may sound a bit extreme, the industry definitely needs a total facelift. Now, why I say facelift? We have a very strong foundation. The industry has solid foundations, but just like a building, right? An old building, strong foundation, give it a new look. And that's what we need. And use that opportunity to then go out there and then give a broader perspective or understanding of what industry we are in today. I think that would be a great starting point. So maybe that's the way to go for us.
Lakhbir, guess what? You've just rolled into our third segment. So maybe without further ado, let's get kick-started on the last one. I think the last one to all of us is really very close to our heart. What can we do now? What can we do better? Again, we need to change. I think I echo some of your points. Talk about facelift. Again, I'm very happy, representing SMF here to say, I want to learn from all of you. What can we do better together? It's not just, as SMF, we actually have a lot of initiatives, but definitely on the ground, great to hear from each of you to say, what can we do better? What can we really do more? So maybe before let me just direct this one back to Eugene. Again, Lakhbir alluded to a point about we are not being sexy enough. So maybe Eugene, from your perspective, whether is it Gen Z or millennials, are we attractive enough as an industry? Maybe let's kickstart with that. I hear from the rest of the panelists. Maybe Eugene, you kickstart, then we can go into the rest of our pointers, some more thoughts and action plans.
Thanks, Kingman. That's a great question. What is the awareness of maritime in young people today? And I think we look at, for example, the Suez Canal blockage. And I think that may have been the first time that a lot of young people hear of a company called Evergreen Marine. And the first time maybe that they start thinking, well, where's the goods that I ordered on Amazon or on Taobao or on one of these, online ordering platforms? And I think we see in general that there's a very low awareness amongst young people today about the jobs that might exist in the maritime sector, the types of career pathways available, and the firms that are working in this space. So I suppose in terms of branding, I do agree with Lakhbir here on how we can raise the profile of the maritime sector and of the firms working in it. So I'll just make two very brief points here. I think the first one is linked to what what Mark said really about decarbonization. I think the Sustainable Development Goals, climate action, are at the forefront of young people's minds, and it's a great opportunity to be bringing in climate-conscious young talent into the sector as well. But that requires infusing, I think, recruitment in the lexicon of today. So versus decarbonization and the carbon cost of shipping, it goes on to, well, what sustainable development goal does this align with? What is my company doing in the larger push to build a greener planet? And so that's really about infusing the lexicon of today into the way that we do recruitment. I think the second one really is this idea that amongst young people today, they tend to associate with the companies and the products that they use very much. And I think it's a great opportunity that COVID has shown us as well, to really raise the importance of maritime and the idea of the convenience of bringing a good directly to your home. And some companies and logistics companies today have done a very good job of that to build their brand. And a local company in Singapore called Ninja Van, I think their mascot having the ninja and this brand awareness amongst young people is very strong. And I think all of that can definitely help. And the last thing I'll just say is that I think a larger shift that maybe has to take place in the maritime sector is this idea of how do we get young people to think of the maritime sector, not just in terms of jobs, but as a passion. And in our work at Advisory, we work with a lot of students, and some of them, I'll give an example, will say, well, I grew up and I was really inspired when the first time I sat on an airplane, or the first time I saw a plane take off. And 20 years down the road, I may not be a pilot, and I may not be, in the air, but that love of aviation has brought me into the aviation space where I do airport management. I do any, services adjunct to the aviation space. So a larger question, I think, is how are we not just bringing young people in to look for jobs, but how are we inculcating the love of the sea in young people at a younger age, which is a larger and more transformational shift, I think, that the industry might have to embark on. But too much thinking from my end, and I'll pass it back to you, Kuman. Yeah.
Great, thanks. Before I go to Linda and Mark, who have lots of inputs, Adonis, can I hear from you on this particular part in terms of what, maybe some quick thoughts? What can we do? Are we at the crossroads? Are we at a pivot point where we can make a difference now?
I think there's definitely an opportunity ahead of us. One thing that has been on the side, let's say, for us, and we've been looking into that, is technology, because Signal Group is the shipping and technology company at the same time. But also maybe I'm a little bit biased because I've spent about 13 years in the Silicon Valley. I feel that the technology sector is probably the biggest competitor for talent with our industry nowadays, at all levels, because right now it probably is the sexiest industry, and at the same time it's a sector that has been combining these different perspectives, these different needs that the new generations have. And their passion for technology. So you work in the technology sector, you like technology, you're working, you're playing, you're living, breathing gadgets and services around the technology sector. So it's something that has come a little closer to them. And one of the notes that I would like to make with respect to what we can do in order to attract people from all different backgrounds and age groups as well is become more adept in the use of technology, let's say attracting and focusing in reaching out to our candidates through social media. That's something that has been growing. There are so many platforms that we cannot even catch up to them. There's a new platform every other month or something. But at the same time, use technology, speak technology to bring people closer, especially in this environment of remote work, of additional flexibility, and how we can, the big question for me is how we can add into our employer branding efforts the touch that we have with technology, and how much we feel that it's playing a big role in who we are today, not just what we promote externally, but who we are internally and how we operate internally. So that kind of goes back to the facelift that Lakhbir was mentioning earlier.
Good, thanks. Before I go back to Lakhbir, then Linda, can I hear from you again? How have things been so different in terms of the recruitment, the retention process? Are you doing something different? I would say going more social savvy, social media savvy, so to speak. I hope you don't mind. Just really on top of my mind. Let us hear from you then.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Just picking up on what Yijun said, we have a very strong internship program, and chatting with our interns, it really struck me how the sustainability agenda attracts them, and you know, to use that as part of your recruitment and attraction hook is actually really, really important, and to allow and to engage our young generation in working on projects that play to energy transition or into the green agenda is actually really important to them. So I think that's one thing that I've learned as a hook for attracting talent is important, young talent particularly. The second thing for me is about, the other thing is around making sure that the diversity within the organization is as rich as it can be. If we want to attract talent, we have to be open to different talent coming into the organization. So we've done a lot of, put a lot of effort into building that diversity. And I mean diversity, whilst we focus on gender and nationality, it's broad. It's about being open to the difference that different sectors can allow and bring into our organization. So diversity. And the third thing for me is about our leaders. How do we train and encourage our leaders to adapt their styles? You know, they've grown up with a leadership style that has been absolutely, has worked extremely well. But as we look forward and we look to these new generations and even talent, again, back to my point about different sectors, how do we adapt and flex? And ultimately it is about how do we be inclusive as leaders? And you know, there's a combination of things, because there's no, you know, one bullet fixes this. This is about us being able to adapt and flex and do multiple things to attract and retain our people.
Great. So everybody is kept busy in organizations now, yeah, not just the HR
all
function.
Absolutely, all organizations.
That's great. Mark, can I maybe really tap on from your survey? I think what is really interesting coming out from it, that there were a few key points, right? From all the way from a change agent, a catalyst, to culture, to diversity, leadership style, technology skills, people skills. Could you maybe just in a few words of yours sort of sum up in a kind of nutshell for us, you know, how are all these interactions coming together for most, from the employer's point of view, as well as from the talent's, new recruits' point of view?
I think all of these things come together, both as a sector and for individual employers, both small and large, is that organisations and the sector as a whole has to have a really good value proposition. And that value proposition is for existing talent in the maritime sector, for why we should retain or how we're going to retain those people. That value proposition is about young people joining the maritime sector, and it's about people joining the sector from other industries as well. And that value proposition, I think, of an absolute mission critical part of that going forward will be this ESG piece. And I think a term that we will become increasingly familiar with is green recruiting. And I think green recruiting will be a term that in 2 or 3 years' time will be something we talk about all the time. But I guess this is about organisations and the sector as a whole building brand equity by promoting what they're doing around the green agenda. The industry has a very exciting story right now to tell. And I think in terms of having something to sell, having a value proposition as an industry, we need to maximise the potential of that. If we talk about Singapore specifically, well, I think Singapore is a kind of a lion city, if you like, and the lion has a very loud voice, and Singapore needs to use that voice to promote that value proposition to other industries and to young people as to why the maritime sector is such a great place to work.
Great. Thanks, Mark. Thanks for sharing. Lakhbir, back to you. In terms of the facelift, maybe you like to elaborate a bit more, say how can we do it? What can we do better?
No, I agree. I mean, good point. But I just wanted to pick up on what Mark said earlier. Singapore, I mean, we have to give credit where it's due. I think we are very fortunate here in Singapore, where we have various organizations, government entities. You know, you have MPA, and then you have SMF, and then you have SSA. Every single party in the maritime sector is very encouraging. And Linda mentioned something very interesting about the internship. I think all maritime companies should embrace the concept of getting in interns. It is extremely important. Even for a small business unit like what I'm running, I have interns all the way from ITE to the polys to the universities. We bring them in. Anytime there's an opportunity to have interns, we bring them in. We use that as the platform to showcase what the maritime sector is all about. And then with the hope that once they graduate, once they come out, they will then come and join us. But then there's another group, which is those that are the mid-career executives that may want to change careers from another industry. And today, this is wide open, right? I mean, there's so many needs within the maritime sector, and we can always then encourage and bring in people. And there's so many incentives out there that are on offer today. So I think as a sector, I think all organizations should embrace this, should make the effort, utilize what is available, and that is how we can collectively make the industry sexy again. Yep.
Oh, great. Lakhbir, on behalf of SMF, please, all are welcome. Scholarships and internships, please come this way. Very, very happy. Again, I think that's really our role. We like the idea that at the end of the day, if you can really get someone started early, in the early days, I mean, if I borrow the point about getting the passion for maritime, I mean, other than, organizing cruises and on board every ship to go to the love the sea, I think that the experience, I think, really, really matters. And of course, with each of the passionate leaders trying to show the way, I'm sure we can get there. Maybe on this note, perhaps maybe Phoenix, can we just take a quick look at the poll results? Then maybe our panelists can opine on it. Okay, so what did the result say then? Okay, the future of maritime talent acquisition lies in rescaling. So it's 66% agree. Panelists, any objection or strong views on this? Everybody's agreeing that they are more rescaling rather than finding someone younger or better in the market. Let me see. Adonis, you want to take a shot at that?
Yeah, definitely, Kengman. I personally agree very much with that, and I want to echo what Linda and Lakhbir said previously about the internship programs. Those are definitely at the forefront of our recruiting and upskilling and instilling passion efforts that we do at the Signal Group, where I think lies the key for successfully running an internship program is that the opportunities that it opens afterwards to the industry within the same company or within the same functional organization or not, but the ability to develop skills and help those early starters in their careers grow within the shipping industry and learn what their career potential is, what the career paths are. That's really what makes a huge difference, instead of having someone who's at the end of the day pigeonholed in doing mundane tasks day by day, not really seeing the big picture. And going back to what Yijun said earlier, being able to connect the daily impact of their work with the big picture, with how they're helping their company succeed, the whole industry move forward. That's really the key to a very successful implementation of an internship program. So I'm totally pro upskilling and reskilling employees, and I think development is, we've seen that at the Signal Group being 90% the reason why people choose to switch jobs and switch companies. So I think it's really, really important.
Great. I've been reminded that we only have a few minutes left, but Linda, maybe just one word from you on the poll survey results.
Sure, thank you, Kenman. I agree, reskilling is very critical, but I think we need to also think broader. we are not going to find the talent that we're going to need for the future as a segment if we don't expand our talent pool. So I would say, yes, reskilling, yes, fresh young talent coming in from universities, and we have to also open our mind to bringing talent in, infusing talent from outside of the sector. And that's why it's very, very critical from a culture and how we work as a sector that we must adapt, because to attract that talent from all those different talent pools, we need to compete. And so we will compete with technology companies' talent. Mm. We will compete with people out there who are working on sustainability, because we will need sustainability people in our organization. So I think we have to be broader and be more aggressive in our hunt for talent. So I agree, but I will broaden my view on that as well.
Great. Without taking anything away from anybody, I've been reminded this time bomb that's staring at me. We are almost to the end. So maybe in terms of, it really takes me at this stage to really say thank you very much to everyone who attended this, and more importantly, the panelists. But before I let you all go, just cheeky me to ask this question. The success rate for Maritime Singapore to be able to attract new talent in 2022. So if I may just quickly go around, just to say, is it higher probability or lower probability in 2022? If Linda, back to you first. If you say a quick word from you, higher or lower?
I'll say higher.
Okay.
And I know we're doing a lot of work on that.
That's great. Lakhbir, you're smiling, so I should say
100% higher.
Okay. And then Mark, maybe from your view?
Yeah, I think it's going to be tough. I think Singapore's going to find this hard, and I think it will be higher, but I think it's going to be tougher than it has been over the last couple of years. But higher, but tougher.
Appreciate it. Adonis?
I think it really depends on the ability to adapt to these new conditions, and I'm confident that Singapore can do that very well. So I would say higher.
Great. So if you say Singapore is a Silicon Valley. Eugene, last but not least, to hear from you, you represent the future. So where are we heading in 2022? Higher or lower?
That's a lot of pressure. I mean, I think the fact that we're having this conversation means it's higher, but the need is more urgent than ever. In Singapore alone, the average age of people in Maritime is now the 50s to 60s. And so there is a need. And so I'm trust that with these conversations happening and with everyone here, I think it's definitely going to be higher.
Great. Really, it's heartening to hear from everybody. I think all of us have really, this topic is close to all our hearts. Thank you so much, right? Linda, Mark, Adonis, Lakhbir, Eugene, thanks so much for your time today. Thanks for sharing insights. Really be so open about it. And hopefully all of us can continue to do our part to a better Singapore, Maritime Singapore. The new talent should come our way. It takes me very much one more time to thank everybody. Don't think we really have too many questions from today. Phoenix, is there anything else you would like us to address since the panelists are here before I let everybody go? Okay, looks like we are done. So on this note, dear panelists, thank you so much for your time. Great pleasure, great honor to moderate this session. Thank you once again. Have a good day. And thank you for all tuning in today. Thank you.
Thank you, Keng.
Thanks very much. We'll keep in touch. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Keng and the panelists.
Nitin, how are you?
Very, very well, thank you. Very positive note to finish the panel discussion.
We need you to help us too,
I'm really glad to hear that. Maritime sector is a great place to work, and I'm sure we all can contribute toward making shipping attractive again. In Lakhbir's word, sexy again, for the younger generation as a career path, and put diversity and inclusion in the fast lane.
I think we all need to do our part. Thank you so much.